Alright boys, so they just updated with this hotfix. I was looking forward to taking a day off, but it looks like the game's in a good spot now. Let's go ahead and launch this puppy. Alright, so I want to talk about this hotfix. I want to talk about why it's necessary to the game and what things are going to look like moving forward, okay? Let's just break this down. So we're starting today at 180, and we're going to be climbing up from here. But let's break down this hotfix
basically
first.
1/8.
Easy like Sunday update. All right. So we saw, when was this? Yesterday. They recently changed the unit tier odds by level. They made tier 5s and tier 4s especially findable. On 8 you get 5. And 20, and on 9 you get 7 and 30, which is pretty ridiculous. So 8 is a gigantic spike for tier 5s, and 9 is a gigantic spike for tier 4s, right? And on top of that, you see another subtle change, which is the difference between 5 and 6, going from 0 to 10, straight up from tier 4s. And this was, it used to be 2 to 7, so it used to be a 5% increase, and now it's a 10. Basically, what they've done with these changes that were yesterday is they made leveling much more of a priority, and building like legendary and epic units much more of a priority. This has a negative influence on the meta in that it's less about committing for like a composition or synergies or strategies, and more about just lasting until the late game, and then whatever board you're having slowly kind of, or sometimes quickly, just being turned into like a legendary and epic board, basically, if that makes sense, right? Here, today, we see a hotfix. The hotfix is that the probabilities have been tweaked once again. Let's go ahead and read this. It was worthwhile to test those odds and see how the changes mixed in with the tier 3 3-star meta we've been playing the past few weeks. In this update, we toned down tier 5 units, moved them up to 9 and 10. We have some ideas internally on what to do with the tier 5 units now. The community's chatter has helped us refine what we think about those pieces. However, we can have a new iteration on them very soon. Yada yada. So this is, I think, basically a good change. Right now, people are saying they've pretty much deleted tier 5 from the game, which is true. And right now, in their current form, I think that's kind of the best temporary solution. The problem is, and I think a lot of people, especially people that are like kind of new to the game or play casually, are very confused by this change. It seems really weird that tier 5s exist and they're cool and they should be big and special, but you don't really play for them. The problem is that when they're good, with their current design philosophy, when they're good, they're too good, and they start taking over compositions. Let's evaluate this and talk about why this is happening, right? So tier 5s, basically, the big thing to understand is that 1-star units suck, right? And 2-star units are all that. So you need 3 of the same one for it to be great. But when it is, it's extremely powerful, and it's hard not for it to find a place in your comp. If you can go through a game, and you can with the new percentage odds, at like 5% at level 8, if you can go through a game and you have the ability to consistently 2-star a tier 5 unit, a legendary unit, you just kind of have to put it in. And also, their alliance tags kind of force you to play for like low synergy. For example, now that Medusa is 2-starable, it sort of has this like this snowball effect where now that you can 2-star Medusa basically every single game, in most games you can 2-star Medusa, now suddenly you kind of need to be running Tidehunter because both of them are scaled, which is very powerful. Tidehunter deals magic damage, Lich deals magic damage, Gyro deals magic damage, so you kind of have to be running scaled, right? You have like the 2 scaled teamfighter pair, which we saw like 2 months ago. This is like the Tidehunter Medusa combo, and it's kind of too good not to run. So suddenly, because you have to run Medusa, you kind of have to run Tidehunter too, right? And that's a problem, because that just like snowballs, and then, you know, you just want to like fill with like some random 2-star 5 costs, and basically you end up with a pretty standard composition every single game, right? It just kind of ends the same, which is really not good. Because whatever comp you're playing, you're not going for 3 stars, you're not going for as much synergies, you're just turning it into legendaries. And pretty much everyone hated this. Don't get me wrong, it's not optimal for tier 5s to not be kind of in the game. Obviously, tier 5s are some big flashy thing. They should exist in the metagame. Obviously, that's like supposed to be the case, but they kind of need to exist in a different form. Because as it is right now, how they're currently designed is just flawed. It will never matter how strong and weak these are. When they're too weak, they're unplayable, and when they're too strong, you kind of have to play them, right? There's a flaw in their design, and given that flaw, it is a better thing for the meta for them to be too weak than too strong, right? So, and that's why they're saying over here, in the meantime, while they're figuring out what they want to do, they're planning on changing, on reworking them, redesigning them, doing something else here, and while they're doing that, in the meantime, they've nerfed them back down to being too weak. So yeah, I mean, people are saying they're deleted from the game. They're absolutely right. And like, that's kind of the best thing for the game in the short term, right? Because they just end up being kind of like a cancer on the meta. They just take over builds, similar to Bloodbound. Where's that big time contract nerf, by the way? Anyway, I think this is a very good change for the game. Very important. The big question on everyone's mind shouldn't be like, oh, is this change good? Is this change bad? It's kind of necessary for the short term. But the real question is, what are they going to do next week or maybe the week after? Like, I think there's going to be a big update next week. I don't know if they even want to try to bundle too many things together all at once. Maybe this tier 5 rework won't come next week. Maybe this will come 2 weeks or 3 weeks from now. But I think it'll be very interesting seeing where they actually want to take the design of legendaries moving forward, right? That's the big question. Like, what's the best way to add these to the game such that they're viable, but also supporting synergies, right? I like the idea of trying to make their alliance tags kind of matter more. Because right now, basically all these units represent very weak alliances. By weak, I don't mean weak versus in terms of power, but weak in terms of the amount of alliances you want, right? They're all like low, kind of like non-committal splash alliances. Like, for example, Lich is Heartless Mage. Heartless is something you run a 2 of, and Mage is something you run a 3 of, typically. Medusa is Scaled. Scaled is something you run a 2 of. Hunter is something you run a 0 of. Techies, you know, you run some Scrappies, you run some Inventors. So Techies is somewhat of an exception, but even with Scrappies, you don't really run 6 Scrappies. Usually Techies ends up being the 5th Scrappy, and you don't even make 6 Scrappy, which is kind of funny. But Enigma is like, he's a Primordial Shaman. These are other alliances that are just like, you know, 2s and 3s. I'd like to see them probably either reworked to be away from just like these independent splash units. There's a few ideas I've actually heard from the devs themselves that I probably shouldn't repeat here, but that sound actually pretty good, honestly. So there's some interesting things they're gonna do. I think there's some possibility for them to try to work them into, you know, the actual like large alliances and try to like, you know, buff those up. Those being stuff like assassins, elusives, knights, like the 6 ofs and the 9 of alliances. Warriors should count, but warriors are kind of weak right now, and that's just the problem with warriors themselves. And make them optional to those comps while not being mandatory to them, right? That's a big deal, by the way. Optional without being mandatory. Troll isn't an example of that, because there's 4 trolls, and to get the 4 troll buff, you need to have Troll Warlord exactly, right? Whereas, you know, maybe he could be like the 5th troll, and then he's an upgrade to one of the trolls that you have, but it's not like you need him to even complete your synergy, right? So, like, for example, they could have a 7th knight in Legendary, right? There's definitely problems with that idea. That's just one random idea. There's a lot of options they could do with these, but the design philosophy of, like, these big teamfight ults that are low synergy are kind of always going to be too weak and unplayable, or too strong and take over every comp, which is, I think, pretty unhealthy. Alright, that's basically this hotfix in a nutshell. And cut. That was for YouTube. What's up, guys? Deadeye deleted from the game? Yeah, Deadeye kind of sucks right now. So the real question is, actually, now that we're here, what actually changed in this other update? Like, so we're back to the meta we had before. So automatic blacklisting is changed, which is a big deal. You know, that's still in effect, and that's good. That's very healthy that automatic blacklisting is good. Increase tier 4 hero pool to 20 per hero. This actually does potentially matter. The tier 4 carry units, those being stuff like Arc Warden, stuff like Dragonite, maybe even stuff like Doom are definitely going to be, you know, something you're going to see more of. Brawnies are still ass from the Juggernaut nerf, although, honestly, if they become underrepresented, they could, you know, you could easily see... I shouldn't say they're ass. I really shouldn't. Like, I mean, the game is just self-balancing by design, right? Like, if people think Brownies are bad, then there's only going to be one Brownie player per game, and they're going to do better. Because Brownies were overly contested before. And I think that's basically it. So it ends up being like a pretty small tweak. Oh yeah, there's pre-leveling from XP, which is just a little bit of minor optimization you can do now. That's going to be harder to get used to. And Bloodbound is still really good, it turns out. Alright. Spitfire is going to be the next troll unit. Spitfire. Wasn't it Snapfire? Here, give me a second. Alright, we'll get into a game here. You guys want to just play? Oh, dude, we're 175. Oh, we're ranking up. Wait a second. I'm ranking up without... I just gained 5 ranks. So I guess that was in the last hour. Because it updated a minute ago. Don't play? Dude, maybe I just should AFK. 5 ranks every hour? 5 ranks every hour means we just sit here for like 2 days and we're good. Volvo gave you free MMR for your patch review. Alright. We'll get into some games and we'll talk about where the meta's at. That was a fast meta. Alright, let's go, boys. Can you compare the rates from before the previous patch to now? Sure, I think that's actually a good idea. So, basically, tier 5 odds. So, at 9, it's 20, 25, 28, 25, and 2. Actually, I haven't done this for, like, every tier. This is, and the old is at 9, so 22% goes into... It looks like, I mean, the epic odds are still there, basically, right? Like, epic odds still go up at 9. It doesn't matter that much. I think 9... So before this update, we can talk about level timing. Level timing yesterday was you level to 8 on 17, and 9 anywhere between 21 and 31, depending on how good of a game you're having. If you're having a good econ, you level to 9 on 21. If you're having an average game, it's 9 on 25. And if you're having like a really bad game, it may be like 9 on 31 or something like that, right? And now... we're kind of back to our standard level timings, which is 8 on 21 and 9 on either 31 or 33, pretty much. I think it should be the case that leveling to 9 before 31 or 33 is insane. And I think that seems to be where we're at right now. Which I think is probably a positive change for the game. I don't know. It makes the game a lot more... And of course, there's always going to be, like, counter-arguments. There's people with, like, different viewpoints. But making the game a lot more built around, like, 3 stars and tight synergy comps and trying to be, like, flexible with the comp you're going, I think is kind of the best thing for this game. It wants to be sort of like a draft game. And that's why it's a good thing that they made it... They reduced the, like, auto blacklisting, which is good because this made it, like, a little too much like a constructed game. And when you're like at level 8, the like rounds like 21 through 31 should like play out pretty well now, which is like just basically knowing when to like econ and when to go for 3 stars. I think that the 3-star meta is like, I don't know, I think people call it the 3-star meta, and I guess some people don't like 3 stars, and some people call it don't like the legendary meta. Sorry, this little yipper running around. But basically, the legendary meta has this very negative connotation that the 3-star meta simply does not have, in my mind. Like, people call it the 3-star meta. I've never really minded the 3-star meta. It's good. I think that's like the healthiest thing for this game, where 3 stars are incentivized, and you want to be on builds that nobody else was going, right? Like, I could actually talk for a long time about all the different ways that this patch just feels better than the last one. Like yesterday, I was playing games where I never pressed tab, I never checked what my opponents were going, I just shoved the same thing every game. Not just the same late game comp, basically the same early game comp too. It doesn't only make the late game not matter, it makes the early game not matter. Because when your build destination doesn't matter, your choices early don't really matter. Like, you shove whatever wins boards, typically stuff that just, like, you know, falls off late, replace your stuff with legendaries, and it just makes gameplay very, very convergent. This is a bad thing from a design standpoint. The entire objective of game design is to create a divergent experience with game to game. You need to have games like playing out in different ways. That's why it's like a drafter game, and that's why they're trying to make it as much as possible an incentive to not be on the same build as someone else. So not only does like the draft mentality of the game kind of try to force you out of your comfort zone to a degree, but the idea of what other players are doing in your lobby is also kind of forcing you out of that comfort zone, right? Stop smiling, Swim. We still remember how you promised to play 2 more games yesterday and then ditched us. I'm sorry, dude. My beat.